Not sure whether you should paint your background first or last? How about paint your background and foreground subject at the same time? That's exactly what I did in this painting I'm actually working on this week. And the way I'm conceptualizing this background is not looking at this painting as containing several disparate pieces parts, a boy, a window, a couch, a cup. I'm thinking in terms of a painting of shapes of values. And so that means that some of the boundaries we define in our human mind disappear in our artist mind and in the painting. Where should these disappearing edges be? Where value meets similar value in the background. So let me show you what I mean. Notice when I started this painting, I painted the clean, clear water completely over Parker's left cheek, which is dark, and the dark background. And I let that whole area be one shape as if it were one thing from the very right side of the painting all the way over to the middle of Parker's face where it gets a lot lighter. I'm thinking more like an artist and looking at the shapes of things as defined by their matching values, not their boundaries. Notice that Parker's left side of his face is in a dark shadow, and his cheek actually touches the edge of the couch. And my reference really helped me because the couch just happens to be a similar color as those shadows in his face. So that helped me realize, oh, I should paint this all as one big shape. This one big interesting shape is what I can hang the rest of this painting on. You can do this when you're designing a painting, and that can help you paint the background at the same time as you paint your foreground subject, at least parts of them. Painting parts of your foreground subject and background together like this will help it hang together a lot better. Even if you do part of your painting and background like this, that works. As I go forward with the rest of this painting, I will keep the Rembrandt windmill principle in mind to make decisions about the values and designs of the background. If you don't know what the Rembrandt windmill principle is, be sure to go watch that video I made where I talk about how to incorporate your subject into a painting so it doesn't look like a cutout. This principle was coined by James Gurney in his book, Imaginative Realism. And he described how you need to have 4 pairings of values between the foreground subject edges and the background subject edges. You need light subject on dark background edges, light background on dark subject edges, light on light edges, and dark on dark edges. Luckily for me, this reference gave me those edges on a platter, which is why I chose this reference, by the way. Let me show you an example. I have a perfect example that will help illustrate this. All right, so this is my painting of a boo, and I very much started this painting with the windmill principle in mind, and it helped me paint the background so well. This is an abstract way I paint many backgrounds, which is a very wet and wet approach, so I get everything wet, and then where I want high contrast, I make it the opposite value of the subject. Our subject in this painting is dark, so he gets a light background where the main area of interest, his face, is. So there's my dark on light edge. And also I have a light on dark edge here. And this is a great place to have a light on dark edge because it starts at the hat, which travels the eye over to this area. So that is a really great place to put this light on dark edge. And then I have a light on light edge where the light's hitting his hat, creating really beautiful, dreamy effects. The windmill principle creates such dreamy effects in your work. In the less important area, in the shadow area, I have a dark on dark edge. And almost always when you're painting with the windmill principle in mind, you'll put your dark on dark, melty, dreamy edges in the shadow area. And that's how you can plan your background around using the windmill principle. And it's so helpful. It has helped me save so many paintings after I learned this. So in the background behind Parker's head is a dark wall, and there is a light window, and there's a light door. So do you see some of the pairings in this reference photo? For example, there's the dark wall behind the dark on the top of Parker's head. There is a light door on the light part of Parker's head. There is a light window on the dark part of Parker's head. So see, we already have 3 of the 4 pairings already. We're doing good. As you move around his face, there's even more opportunities. Later, I will delineate his face from the background couch a little bit, but because I painted the background and that side of his face as one shape in my first wash, it will really help this painting hang together better later. So if you have a hard time visualizing this, squint point your eyes at your reference to see where boundaries of things kind of merge together because their values are so similar. They may not be the same color, but their lightness or darkness or even medium tones may kind of match. And that's where you can have these melting edges where you merge two things into one shape. That will give you a hint where you can paint these boundaries really soft. Photoshop or a similar photo editing program can help. In Photoshop, I hit Control L and get what's called levels, which allows me to adjust the lights, mediums, and darks, the values of my reference. If I darken the mediums, a lot of disparate elements melt together, helping me see as an artist where I need to make those dark on dark edges and where I could just paint them all as one shape. Whereas my human mind wants to make them all separate things, my artist mind can start seeing them in terms of shapes that may or may not include the edges of disparate things. And the background problem that I often see is that there's not enough contrast. So the foreground subject will have a lot of medium values. This is very typical. And the background will have a lot of medium values. Or I'll see a light dog on a light background often, or a dark dog with a fairly dark background. You want to have contrast between your foreground subject and your background. So I will show you some examples of that. Well, let's look at it. Let's look at an example right now. This is painted by Rosie Lamb. Thank you so much, Rosie Lamb, for sharing your already beautiful painting with us. I love this painting, but I also saw a great opportunity to illustrate how you can use a background to make a painting even stronger. Let me show you in Photoshop what I did to make this an even stronger design. And also thank you to Deanne Hope for this wonderful reference photo of these hares fighting. I did not know they did that. And first off, let's just say how beautiful this painting already is. I love how she used some of the background grasses to kind of point the viewer towards the bunnies. Do you see those grasses that are leaning into the bunnies? That helps the viewer's eye know to look at the bunnies. And I love all the splashy background, melty, abstract, impressionistic colors. It's just gorgeous. It looks like it's glowing. Here I'm going in with green. Honestly, if I was painting this, I would use an even darker green than this. And by darker, I mean with more blue added and maybe a little bit more red added too to gray it down, because a gray green that's dark in the background will really make the warm colors in these bunnies come forward. So again, there's several different kinds of contrast. There's contrast in values, light against dark. There's contrast in color, often complementary colors. Look across the color wheel and see what is across the color wheel. These bunnies are yellow. So you could put some purple in this background, and I would suggest that. And even in the reference photo, there is some purple, gray purples in the background and all that bushy darkness behind them. That's perfect. Just paint that in. There's also contrast between values, light and dark. So the bunnies are light, we make the background dark. I'm adding more grasses in the background to break up that negative space. I painted all that in the background a flat green, but what I would suggest is use several different colors. Don't make it all a flat green like I did in my Photoshop. And then I'm breaking that negative space up with these grasses with interesting shapes, and they're pointing at the bunnies. So you can use natural elements in the background to kind of point the viewer's eye back towards your main subject, like I'm doing here. And saturation is another kind of contrast. If your foreground is really saturated with a lot of color, and I would suggest that because that makes subjects come forward, make your background less saturated, more gray, and those gray colors will really support those color pop colors and make them vibrate and glow even more. One other thing that I didn't illustrate with these bunnies that I would have liked to illustrate better is that in the background, you want a lot of soft, blurry, merging colors. You don't want a bunch of hard edges. So you want hard edges around the bunnies so they come forward, and you want hard edges in the bunny to tell the viewer's eye, hey, this is where to look. And you want most of the detail in the bunnies. And in the background, you want soft edges. You want soft melting edges and fewer details, but some more details. I see this happen a lot in paintings where people put dab, 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 dab of all different kinds of things in the background, and it just looks so chaotic. And then the viewer's eye doesn't know where to look. So when you're painting backgrounds and you want to avoid chaos, think in terms of big shapes and look at what big shapes you could put in the background to act as a support so that there's not too much chaos going on in the background. And I did a terrible job of that with my Diana painting, I'm the first to admit. But I fixed it with a glaze, so it's all good. All right, so let's wrap everything up with in general formula for what you want in your background. You want it to support your foreground subject, and to do that, usually it's gonna be softer, grayer, contrasting value and color to your foreground subject. So if you keep that in mind, that will give you a really good starting point to figure out how to make your background really support your foreground subject. And also, if you decide to use a reference photo that has a realistic background, you don't want to use an abstract background, just paint that damp on damp or wet on damp for soft edges. But still, if you paint it on damp paper, it'll hold those edges enough that you can tell the story of realism, but it's soft and blurred out, just like a photograph with a blurred out background, but it's still realistic. You can do that with watercolor painting by painting on damp paper. And I made a whole video about painting on glistening, damp, dry paper with different consistencies of tea, milk, and cream consistency. I think it's such a great video. It's my most underwatched, underappreciated video. I think it's so great. If you're especially new to watercolor, you'll learn so much about how to paint with watercolor by just watching that video. I'll link it here. But anyway, thank you so much for joining me today. Come see me next Saturday at 8 a.m. Eastern. I try to upload every Saturday at 8 a.m. so I can live chat with you guys. So come join the live chat at my next premiere of my next video, 8 a.m. next Saturday. I will see you there. Thank you so much for joining me on today's video. I appreciate it. Leave me a comment. I love to chat with you. Join my Facebook group that is free. I'll link that here. And that way, I hopefully will see a lot more of you, which I would love. Until next time, go watercolor your world. Bye, everybody. A yellow cheetah, for example, would be gray purple. Whatever your color your subject is, you want to take the complement of that color and put it in your background quite a bit, and usually gray it down. Not always though, but often.